I don't particularly like onions, but I'm going to start here because an onion is a helpful metaphor for the inner journey, or what you might call the spiritual life. Just like an onion has layers, so do we. We have layers or levels of consciousness. The outer layers are perhaps what we might call the more ordinary, the more everyday levels of awareness that we have, yeah? Our roles, our personas, the way that we show up in the world, our experience of life on the surface, yeah? This tends to be where we spend most of our focus. This is the layer that we are most aware of, yeah? The outer layers of our consciousness. But a good spiritual journey will lead us beyond the periphery. That's kind of the whole point of the spiritual life, is to take us on a journey within, towards our core, towards our deepest consciousness, which we might call our true self, or our soul, or our essence. There's so many words, so many names for it. I found that the more I've taken this inner journey, the more I've discovered parts of myself that make me more whole, more myself, more alive. The exciting thing is that there is no limit to what we can discover in this deeper dimension within us as we take that journey through the layers. This core part of us is the vine that Jesus said that we, the branches, need to abide in. Yeah? He says, I'm the vine. I'm that core part of you. You're the branches. And if you really want to bear fruit, you need to be connected to that vine, to the deeper dimension within you. That core layer of consciousness is our divinity. It's the divine. It's God in us. And it's there that we find our richest source of creativity and passion and wisdom and love. There is so much waiting for us there. But the challenge is, it can be tricky getting to that deeper place. It can be very tricky to connect to that life force deep within us, because often we tend to get stuck in the outer layers. Have you ever noticed that? You kind of get stuck in the everyday thoughts. We easily settle for a more superficial existence, and so what happens is that we lose connection with the vine within us. We deny ourselves of so much of our potential that is dormant within us, just waiting for us to connect with it. This is why we go on the journey of Advent each year. The purpose of Advent is to awaken us to the gift of God that is deep within us. The goal of Advent is to evoke in us a renewed longing for this life force that exists within, this presence of the divine, the vine that our branches is designed to live in. That's also what Jesus is trying to do in our gospel passage today. Now, you probably noticed that the picture he's painting today is pretty grim, yeah? It's pretty hopeless. He says, there's going to be signs in the sun and moon and stars. On earth, nations in agony, bewildered by the clamour of the ocean and its waves, men dying of fear as they await what menaces the world, for the powers of heaven will be shaken. Just like last week, it sounds like Jesus is trying to warn us, maybe even threaten us, scare us with these kind of grim pictures, this prophecy of the future. But I want to suggest again that what Jesus is actually trying to do is to stir up in us a longing and a trust in God. See, he goes on, he says, when these things take place, Stand erect. Hold your heads high because your liberation is close at hand. Jesus is saying, look, you need to trust that somehow all the injustice, all the suffering that you experience, that you notice around the world, you need to trust that somehow all of that is held within the divine purpose, and that divine purpose will win out. You don't have to understand how. You can't understand how. All you can do is trust that God's got this covered. See, Jesus is trying to evoke this longing, this longing for God, this trust in God. Jesus knows that there is an important link between our longing and true enduring hope. And it's that connection I want to reflect a little bit on today. Last week, we started to unpack our Advent theme, which we're calling Trusting in Tomorrow. That's the goal. This Advent is to reflect on how can we really grow in a genuine confidence in the future despite all the mess of our lives. My first point last week was that despite all of our challenges, we are designed to live with enduring hope. You are designed, that's how you're designed, to live with a hope that is not shaken, as we were singing earlier. We can all win in this dimension of our life, regardless of what we're facing. That was my first point last week. My main message, though, was that this true hope is ultimately found only as we encounter the presence of God here and now. That's how we find confidence in the future. It's by encountering God, by opening our hearts to His presence here and now. You see, this is where we can get a little kind of confused. True hope is not something we achieve by the latest breakthrough technology or medical finding or whatever. It's not something we achieve. In fact, true hope is not even something that we can understand intellectually. Hope is revealed to us. We discover hope as we open our hearts to grace. That was the key message last week. Today I want to add one more step. I want to suggest tonight that this whole journey towards enduring hope begins with longing. It's hard to describe longing. We all experience it differently, but we all have it, whether we're conscious of it or not. I want to suggest that longing is something like a deep yearning for something more, for something greater, for something that is more true, more meaningful. And I also want to suggest that longing is our most natural way to God. You know, for thousands of years, human beings were living on this planet and they didn't have the Bible. They didn't have books on theology. They didn't have the teachings of the saints. They didn't have churches and sacraments like we know them today. But they still discovered God. They still went on this internal journey. They still lived spiritual lives. And no doubt the way that they were able to do that was by tapping in to the longing deep in their heart. By paying attention to their limitations, to their disappointments, to their suffering, to their desire for something more. It seems to me that this is the path that opens us most deeply, most profoundly to the divine life within us, to the life of grace. Our longing, which is natural, it's given to us. If we can sort of touch into it, if we can hold on to it, it's what creates a space in us that God can fill. So, If you want to grow in true hope, if you want to be a person that really has a profound trust in tomorrow, a confidence in the future, I'm suggesting tonight that the key is to get in touch with your longing. This is the most basic task of the spiritual life. It's even more important than knowing lots of theology. Yeah, you can know lots about God, but if you're not in touch with your longing for God, then it's pretty much useless, I'm sorry to say. The task is to get in touch with our longing, but that can also be very challenging. Because sitting with our longing can be uncomfortable. Yeah, you've probably noticed that. Our longing can put us in touch with our lack, with our limitations, with our unmet desires. Being without longing can sometimes feel painful. And so what we tend to do, instead of paying attention to it and kind of sitting with it and embracing it, what we often do is avoid our longing, don't we? Often unconsciously, we create strategies that distract us from it. And this is exactly, I think, what Jesus is discouraging us to do in the gospel today. He says, watch yourselves or your hearts will be coarsened with debauchery and drunkenness and the cares of life, and that day will be sprung on you suddenly like a trap. Jesus is saying, pay attention to any kind of coping behavior that you take on to protect yourself or distract yourself or avoid your longing. The lack, the needs, the desires that are within you. Be careful not to cover up this longing that is wanting to lead you to the divine. Yeah? Now, I don't know what it is for you, but I know for me, over the years, one of the key ways I've done this is through my work and my achievement. That's one way I've kind of distracted myself from the lack within me, the uncomfortable longing. Just keep busy, do lots of stuff, get lots of feedback, yeah? For some here, it might be perfectionism. Anyone know that one? Or being hyper-controlling. If you're super in control of your life, you don't have to kind of ever worry about feeling lack, experiencing your longing. For others, it might be some kind of escapism, or perhaps some kind of addictive behaviour, or for some of us it might be being overly social. Yeah, if you're always connecting, always talking with people, always relating, of course you never have to face yourself and sit with your longing. We've got all kinds of complex and often unconscious strategies. We're brilliant at it. We're so good. But the problem is that these strategies mask our longing. And that longing is ultimately what opens us up to God. Yeah. Now, please, it's really important that we recognise that sometimes we do need to distract ourselves. We do need to avoid our reality because we just don't have the resources to cope with it. Yeah. Sometimes we need to do that. But if we are always distracting ourselves, if we're always avoiding, we get lost in our coping strategies, and so we lose touch with our natural God-given longing for something greater. Jesus is saying, watch yourselves, because he knows that when we avoid our suffering, we end up suffering even more. When we avoid our suffering, we end up suffering even more. When we avoid our lack, our limitations, we experience even more lack and more limitations. Jesus knows that the way to a genuine hope is by getting in touch with our reality, whatever that may be, our longing, our limitations, our disappointments, our pain, our suffering. Because when we sort of touch into that, the heart just opens. It's a mystery how it happens, but it opens to something beyond us. It opens to grace. It opens to healing. It opens to love. That's the message of Christianity, right? Life, ultimate life, hope comes through death, through lack, through loss. So I want to leave you with a question that you might reflect on a little this week. What are the behaviours that distract you from your longing? Just try and be as honest with yourself as you can. Little clue to these behaviours. Perhaps just notice any sort of ways in which you tend to experience burden or anxiety or fear. That can be a little kind of sign of your coping strategy. But most importantly, when you notice what it is, don't judge it. Don't judge it, and don't try and get rid of it. So, I shouldn't do that. I've got to stop. I've got to... Just notice it. Be compassionate towards it. Yeah? Sit with it. Invite God into it. Just pay attention to it. Watch it, as Jesus says. Just watch it. If you watch your coping strategies for long enough, you will eventually notice the deeper lack and longing that they are trying to hide. Yeah? And that longing, that lack that you experience is your path to encountering the grace of God. And it's in that grace that you will find reasons for hope and a deeper trust in tomorrow.